The South African government has welcomed the ICC's warrants of arrest for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his former Defence Minister Yoav Gallant and Hamas leader Mohammed Diab Ibrahim al-Masri.
Now, the spokesperson for the Department of International Relations and Cooperation, that's Kristen Piri, says this marks a significant step towards justice for crimes against humanity and war crimes in Palestine.
He says South Africa reaffirms its commitment to international law and urges all state parties to act in accordance with their obligations in the Rome Statute.
All right, now SABC News Correspondent Sherwin Bryce-Pease joins us from New York with the very latest on the story. Sherwin, what has been the reaction thus far?
Well, let's start with the state of Israel. The Prime Minister's office, of course, the Prime Minister, one of the indictees, I have some feedback in my ear. He called it an anti-Semitic decision of the International Criminal Court. Israel utterly rejects the false and absurd charges of the International Criminal Court. A biased and discriminatory decision, it calls it. It says that no anti-Israel decision will prevent the state of Israel, Mfundo, from defending its citizens. The Palestinian Liberation Organization called it a very important decision from the ICC in the shadow of what it believes is a genocide against the Palestinian people, calling the decision long overdue. The European Union's foreign policy chief, Josep Borrell, issued a statement saying that the decision of the court must be respected and upheld, including from all European Union member states. And of course, there are 27 EU member states. The Israeli ambassador to the United Nations, Danny Danon, called the ICC decision the pinnacle of diplomatic terrorism. Human Rights Watch said the decision, in the face of strong opposition, including from the United States and Israel, deserves international support. It said the decision breaks through the perception, Mfundo, that certain individuals are beyond reach of the law. And we've also heard from the incoming Senate Majority Leader. He spoke late last week, almost prefacing the decision that was handed down by the pre-trial chamber of the International Criminal Court today. Incoming Senate Republican Majority Leader John Thune. This is how he framed the action by the ICC. Watch.
Now you have the International Criminal Court, or the ICC, and its prosecutor pursuing warrants against Israeli officials. That is outrageous, and it is unlawful. The ICC rogue actions are a threat to our ally Israel, and left unchecked, it could pose a threat to America in the future. I am calling on Leader Schumer to bring a bill to the floor sanctioning the ICC, which the House has already passed on a bipartisan basis. And if he refuses to act, our Senate Republican majority next year will. We will stand with Israel and make this and other supportive legislation a top priority in the next Congress. So to our allies in Israel and to the Jewish people around the world, my message to you is this: reinforcements are on the way. Senate Republicans reclaim the majority in 6 weeks, and when we do, we will make clear that the United States Congress stands squarely in Israel's corner, and we will help the Trump-Vance administration defend Israel and promote peace in the region.
So, Mfundo, the first takeaway is that there is a huge chasm developing even between long-standing, traditional, historic allies. The United States giving its position there, and quite a different position from the European Union chief, saying that it's incumbent on all members of the Rome Statute, including all 27 members of the EU, to implement this court's decision.
There were certainly mixed reactions there, as was expected. But beyond this, just remind us of the charges here that these specific men face.
Yeah, so two sets of charges here. One targeting the leadership of Israel, and then one targeting the leadership of Hamas. Let me quickly give you a summary of what the court's decision has determined here. It first pronounced itself on jurisdiction, believing that because the state of Palestine acceded to the Rome Statute in 2015, the court therefore has jurisdiction over crimes or alleged crimes committed in the occupied Palestinian territories, including East Jerusalem, the West Bank, and the Gaza Strip, which is the focus of the indictment. Essentially, it has now indicted Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the former Defence Minister Yoav Gallant for crimes against humanity in Fundo and war crimes committed at least from the 8th of October 2023 until when the indictment was issued by the application was issued by the prosecutor in May. It charges that each of the two bear criminal responsibility for the following crimes as co-perpetrators for committing the acts jointly with others. The war crime of starvation is a method of warfare, the crimes against humanity of murder, persecution, and other inhumane acts. They believe that there are reasonable grounds to believe that both individuals intentionally and knowingly deprived the civilian population in Gaza of objects indispensable to their survival, including food, water, and medicine and medical supplies, as well as fuel and electricity. It further finds that there are reasonable grounds to believe that there was no military need for or any other justification under international humanitarian law that could be identified for the restriction placed on access for humanitarian relief operations. The chamber therefore found reasonable grounds to believe that Netanyahu and Gallant bear criminal responsibility for the war crime of starvation as a method of warfare. And as we've been reporting, there is, of course, this huge risk of famine, particularly in the northern governorate of the Gaza Strip. Finally, the chamber assessed that there are reasonable grounds to believe that Netanyahu and Gallant bear criminal responsibility as civilian superiors for the war crime of intentionally directing attacks against the civilian population in Gaza. So that's as it pertains to the Israeli leadership. Then, of course, the court has also filed an arrest warrant for Mohammed Diab Ibrahim al-Masri, one of the Hamas commanders. They withdrew the arrest warrants. The prosecution withdrew the arrest warrants initially sought for Ismail Haniyeh and Yahya Sinwar, also two leaders of Hamas, because they have since perished. They have since been killed by the Israeli Defence Forces. But in addition to that, despite the arrest warrant issued for al-Masri, the Israeli military has already confirmed that he was killed in an airstrike by the Israeli Defense Force in July. What the court has, though, said is that he bears responsibility for crimes against humanity of murder, extermination, torture, and rape and other forms of sexual violence, the taking of hostages. But of course, this all becomes moot if the court is now able to establish that Mohammed Diab Ibrahim al-Masri has indeed been killed, as has been widely reported by the Israeli Defense Force.
Sherwin, these are very serious charges. So what happens now?
There are 124 countries that are signatories to the Rome Statute, including South Africa, essentially almost 2/3 of UN member states. What would normally happen in a situation like this is perhaps the state of Israel, were to be a change in leadership, would then hand over the indictees to the International Criminal Court. Remember, the ICC doesn't have a standing army that's going to go in and arrest them. So it is very much reliant on parties to the Rome Statute to effect these arrests. What we know is that Israel and the United States, for example, are not parties to the statute. They are not going to hand over Benjamin Netanyahu or Yoav Gallant because they believe the court does not have jurisdiction. But what it immediately means is that Israel's Prime Minister and the former Defence Minister will no longer be able to travel to countries that are parties to the Rome Statute. You will not be seeing Benjamin Netanyahu anytime soon in the European Union or travelling to South Africa for that matter. So their world becomes slower. The question now is incumbent on parties to the Rome Statute as to how they will effect the decision by the pre-trial chamber, right? It's incumbent on them now to effect the arrest. The question is, will they do so? And that really is something that we will wait and watch very closely to see how that plays out.
All right, Sherwin, thank you very much for that update. That's SABC News Correspondent Sherwin Bryce-Pease speaking to us there from New York.